guy's in. This guy's in. And with laser type precision, let me take off my toga, we will draw a spine being separated as the skull's tabletop is the only thing to discern with how accurate that advance actually is. Okay, so here we have a brain, the brain stem, and the tailbone. They should be aligned, but since this is a profile, it's hard to deduct where the front or the back would be. So if you cut diagonal, missed entirely. In their fucking pocket, lining it. And so when in New Zealand you've got this little baby and then the parents don't want spike protein blood being introduced into its body because spike protein from the vaccine can be in your body up to 14 days, if not months. And so the parents said you can have an abortion, but then when your baby's born, you can't choose what operation it wants to have on it. They said, no, I don't want my baby getting blood from vaccinated people. In comes the security, wisps away the baby. So that baby does not belong to the parents. That baby belongs to the state. And that's what they want. The leftist dichotomy is that your kids are not yours, they're the state's. And so what a perfect picture. They then take the parents into custody. So they kidnap the kid and take the parents into custody. This is one example. I'll show some footage, but what's more impressive is that in America there was this bag put over the head of a person in the hospital just because they were not of a certain circumstance. Mainly they had not been vaccinated. So that
operation. No, you do not.
Jude, please, can I just go down with him?
Reporting for...
the more that you can bunch together, but specify in entirety, binary and then the other mechanical, and not confuse the gray area between. How much of an influence does that have on what is now history? Never going outside to make a call on a payphone. Not an option. And why is that? Because investments of money has been flooded into 5G panels because cell phones. There are no longer payphones because of cell phones. How much of a direct relation does a corporation of not just Grafton, but of everywhere have to do with that? Another question. Dialing 0 to talk to an operator. That's of an occurrence that I had done in middle school, not since then. I think as they're put out of the job because Google, and you look on Google, and that's the reason that you can't call an operator at 0. I could be wrong, but I'm gonna need a fact check. Secondly, if you have ratty hair, what can help is finding gel. Now, I don't buy gel, I find it. Ostensibly, it's left around when you're in a private club. And if you pinch the hair in the areas where your hair is cut off from, it sews into the region of the rest of it flowing in a dynamic of one solid shape, as opposed to looking scraggly like what split ends have. If you've got a whole bunch of split ends together, they're gonna be like scraggly. And I know wild hair is a cool thing, like retro colors, specifically in ripped jeans and faded colorations of ripped jeans on the frontal leg area. But scraggly hair and wild hair are two different things. The reasons why diagonals are so accurate is because they account for two regions at once, splitting the difference, if you will. This is imperative because in an era of time, there's always a deficit, meaning the past from the future, so that can be split in as well. But if you've got a body and it's aged differently, mainly you have more wear and tear in certain regions, that's experiencing more tension than just none at all. A frequency of where sound interacts with the electricity is hard to decipher the difference, and in hertz sometimes it actually does. So in cleanliness, how much does cleanliness occur when you can't buy new shoes every single time you put them on? This is what ostensibly the stunner Birdman would have done, because the Birdman of Cash Money Records is one of the richest in the rap industry, is $1 billion industry. And so Birdman, he has new Air Force Ones every time he puts on his shoes. Me, on the other hand, I have to air dry my shoes, air dry my feet from my shoes, the producer of, well, what ostensibly is, quite frankly, dampness. Now look at how interesting this tire is. I can't pull it through properly because it's gunked up, and that's ostensibly a brake. Anywho, the interesting part is that, however, the socks are in between the shoes and the feet sweating. So how in particular is drying the three. Don't forget to throw your socks out. Now this is what I call RIPing clothing. I would RIP clothing. It's ostensibly what Birdman does with his shoes. Every time he wears a pair, he rests in peace that article of clothing. So he would ostensibly throw it away inside a garbage can. And so when I would wear a piece of clothing, I'm not as rich as him, but however, I can throw it away if I've owned the clothing for longer than like 10 years. I have to mention the fact that when you wear clothing for over 10 years, it does two things. Specifically, the color fades. Notably, if it's a gray color, I'm trying to yell out because all these cars are smacking the concrete with water in between. Actually, interesting dichotomy of how much my dryness of in between socks and shoes are. That diagonal has much to do with how loud these cars interact with the road when it's wet. It makes a snap, crackle, pop, if you will. So the dichotomy of all my facts getting laid out, besides getting all these air brushes of loud sweeping rubbers on concrete. you have a gray shirt or sweater, the more that you wear it, it'll fade color, but it's going to fade to a darker gray, and that can be a good thing because it's supposed to be gray. However, it can hold a whole bunch of body odor inside the clothing. Specifically, the more that you wear it, it'll catch right back up from where it last left off. And this is much to do with laundry, where there comes a point where odor is so tightly wound inside the threading that you can't quite get it from not being in there. So at that point, it's much more likely for you to RIP it. Well, now, however, for the dichotomy of your spinal cord to your skull, if it were cut in a diagonal from an aerial point of view, that would be a really interesting attribute. And it's only like looked at where you're only using part of your brain at all times. You're only exercising part of your entirety to its fullest potential, because no one is, 0% body fat, which is what you're aiming for every time you're exercising, turning that fat into energy. So much is the case, those things allotted if you're cutting your spinal cord from your skull in a diagonal from an aerial point of view. It's kind of like this imagery where I think it's important for those reasons, but more so if you're looking at it from an artistic point of view. If you're walking around with your brain sat on top of your skull, well then you put that on the diagonal that had been cut from your bottom of the skull as like a tray kind of tabletop, from your spinal cord downward, that same diagonal, and with your brain on top. It's almost like balancing on a hairpin your brain, all of its activity. I don't know, use it as a bookmarker, maybe a logo, or teach your doctor a thing or two about your potential.